Welcome back, my friends, to a new type of video I'm trying to do on the channel. If you like it, let me know. If you don't, I won't do it again, but I wanted to go over the 13.1 patch notes since this is a major patch. As you can see, it starts with a nice picture of Yumi, and I'll tell you right now, this is the most love this cat is going to get this entire patch. She is basically nerfed into non-existence by the time it is all over. The major highlights of the patch are Ace is getting a buff, Admin's getting a buff, Laser Corp a buff, Mecha Prime a buff, but not really. We'll get into it once we get there. A slight buff in Recon in how it works. Dragon's Claw, Infinity Edge, Hextech, Gunblade, Thrill of the Hunt, Bel'Veth. This is probably one of my favorite buffs, and it's kind of a stealth buff. I'll explain when I get to it. Draven, Ezreal, Fiddlesticks, Jinx, Mordekaiser, Set, Silas, Syndra, Talon, Vayne, Zac, and Zed all getting buffs, and a bunch of hero augments are getting buffs. There's adjustments to Aphelios, Camille, Misfortune. This is a key one, especially for our Animaniacs build, Urgot, and Vi. Lee Sin is getting a rework in one of his augments. And then on the nerf side, and these are just pretty significant and directed, Brawler is getting a nerf at 6 and 8. Duelist is getting, really it's more of an adjustment than a nerf, but I guess it does count as a nerf. I'll explain when we get there. Mascot nerf, Spellslinger nerf. Supers are getting, well, they're getting their kryptonite added to them. They're going to be gone. And right along with all of that, Giant Slayer and Blue buff. Supers, Giant Slayer, and Blue buff are all aimed at Yumi, who is also getting a nerf on her own. This is a very directed attack on that poor little cat. It was a build I did not show on the channel for two reasons. One, it wasn't particularly good in hyper roll because you had to hit a lot of 3 stars, and that wasn't that often in hyper roll. Number two, I knew it was going to get nerfed into extinction very quickly. The first and sort of exciting thing to talk about is they are adding a temporary game mode. It's going to come alive January 12th at 11 a.m. and it will exist until February 9th. You can go to the patch notes. I'll put a link in the description below and read all about it. It's basically kind of like TFT Earth, where you can create overpowered teams. You start with 4s and 5s, you get an immense amount of loot, and then who's ever losing is going to get a special bonus. So it's just really going to be a race to the most OP, insane comp you can make using 4s, 5s, and whatever you can do. I currently am hoping to be able to maybe do some live streams on it. I don't know for sure. I might try to do it as soon as it goes live. But go ahead, check out the link, read about it below. The whole event comes with a whole bunch of new tacticians, lots of really cool stuff that you may want to buy, you may not want to buy, but it's all there, and it's going to all go away when the entire thing ends. And I want to jump down to the large changes. The first one is going to be Ace. Ace is now going to be increased from 30% to 30%. So the 30% stays the same for the 4 aces, but the single ace will now execute champions when they hit 15% health instead of waiting until they get down to 12. This is a pretty big buff. Admin's 6-piece bonus is being increased to 100%. This one didn't really impact me in my head all that much because I've never gotten to 6 admin. So as long as 2 and 4 stay the same, yeah, it can still work. What they have done is buffed a lot of the admin traits, and I think this is key because, as I said in my Soraka video and in some of the comments to people, whether to go admin is based so strongly on whether you get a good one or a bad one, and the bad ones were really bad. Now the, quote, bad ones aren't as bad anymore. In some cases, they've reduced ones that were really good. And so they've kind of leveled the entire skill set out a lot more. You can look through all the specific changes here, but as you can see, there is a ton of adjustment to admin. But As before, if you decide to go admin, look at what that first trait is. If it's not going to work with what you're doing, I would say then abandon the entire thing and try to look for another direction to go. Duelist has been changed. They call it a nerf. I'll call it just an adjustment, because what they did is they decreased the attack speed per auto, 6, 12, 20, 30 down to 5, 10, 16, 24. But they increased the number of stacks you get up to 12. So in the end, it kind of comes pretty close to evening out. It will be a little bit slower at the highest level, but at the main levels, it stays pretty close to the same. As you can see before, you would get a 200% attack speed increase at 10 stacks. Now you're going to get a 192% increase. That's not a huge nerf, but it is a slight nerf. And I have a Duelist video coming out later this week, and you'll see that it really does depend on doing a lot of damage really fast, so this could impact it. I just won't know until I start actually trying to play it out again and see if it makes a huge difference. Laser Corp is getting a pretty significant buff, especially at the 9 level. 60 goes to 65, 150 to 165, and 150 to 200. Now, this only matters in the sense of Hyper Roll, because Hyper Roll you have to think in terms of 9 champions, and the Laser Corp bonus is at 9. But, and this is important, there's only 7 Laser Corps, so you're going to need 2 emblems to make that work, or at least a heart and an emblem to make that work. But that 150 to 200 additional damage that you're doing with their lasers is going to be significant, so I expect to see a lot more Laser Corp attempts in it. Even at the 6th level, the 150 to 165, that's going to be pretty significant as well. The 3 level, 60 to 65, I don't see that changing the equation all that much. Mascot is getting a pretty significant nerf, and that's part of the Torture Yuumi theme that goes along with this entire patch. The health regen per 2 seconds is being changed from 1.5, 3.25, 6.5, 12% to 1.5. That stays the same, then down to 2.5, 4.5, and 10%. That is a pretty significant reduction, and will likely see the end, well, it will see the end of the Yuumi comp, because along with the other nerfs that are going in, it makes it almost impossible to play, but you might see a little less of the new comps, so you're not going to be able to just roll along the way you did before. Now, Mecha Prime is being buffed in that the damage and ability power are being increased, but I'm going to show you a little bit later on why this might not matter, because they have nerfed the key champion for the mechs. I think they're trying to make Draven more of a carry. I don't think the buffs that they added to Draven are going to be enough to make up for the loss that they took away from Jax. You'll see when we get there. The Recon Dash AI is updated to better avoid crowds, which is great. You'll see I have a video coming out this week where the Recon just rolls right into somebody else. So it is going to be much better to have them actually get away from people instead of rolling into another person. This is another part of the Yuumi evisceration. The Super's base damage increase is from 20% down to 18, and then per 3-star reduced from 5 to 3. So Super Yuumi's pretty much gone as a concept. It's going to be almost impossible with the mascot nerfs, the Yuumi nerf, and the Super's nerf for that comp to really matter. Spell Slingers are being nerfed, and I think this is really aimed at the Talia wipe the entire board build, which I have used, but there are probably still going to be ways to get to it. It's just not going to be quite as easy. So I wouldn't recommend looking to force Spell Slingers unless you get really good items that are going to help to boost power so that Talia can still wipe entire boards. Let's move on to the specific units and just go through them fairly quickly. Galio's getting a mana nerf and a shield nerf. The shield nerf to me is really what matters. 250, 300, 375 down to 200, 240, 280. Silas is getting a minor buff in his health, but a slightly more significant buff in the heal amount. 130, 150, 170 to 150, 170, 190. This is part of what I see as an overall buff to the Animaniacs build. For our tier level units, Annie is getting a max mana nerf. It's not particularly significant, and a burst shield nerf. Again, not a huge decrease, but when you take that in combination with the Spellslinger nerf, it's going to be much more, since she was usually the tank in a Spellslinger build. And so this would be increased by the Spellslinger AP buff. And since that's going to be less, and this is less, it's kind of a double nerf to using Annie as a sole tank in the Spellslinger build. Draven, this is their buff to Draven. It goes from a 0.7 to a 0.75 attack speed. Yes, it's a buff, but when we get into the Mecha Prime stuff a little bit more, when we get to the tier 3, you'll see why I don't think that makes much difference. Ezreal's getting a very slight damage buff. Jinx is also getting a damage buff, but more importantly, Jinx is getting a fishbone damage buff. That is her ult: 200, 300, 480, 225, 335, 525 at 3-star level. And as you know, she was one that I relied on previously in the Animaniacs build, so the fact that that was already one of my go-to builds for climbing, this makes this even stronger. Yuumi and the continuing cruelty to the poor little cat gets her range reduced by 1, and oh yeah, hurt damage also significantly reduced from 255, 385, and 600 to 220, 330, 510. As if everything else they did to the build that was using her the most wasn't enough, yeah, they just went after her directly as well. Now let's get into the tier 3 units and why I say I think we've seen the backside of Mecha Prime until they undo what they just did. Jax's attack damage is being reduced. The 50 to 45 is not really that significant. This is where it starts to matter. The adaptive strike damage has been reduced, 110, 165, 285 down to 100, 150, 250. The adaptive strike damage per stack, 30, 45, 75 down to 20, 30, 50. Rageblade is not going to be as effective as it was before, and the adaptive strike max at full stacks damage, 320, 480, 810 down to 240, 360, 600. Jax is going to get significantly nerfed, and while mech is being increased slightly, it's not even close to this, so I think Jax as a carry just is not going to work. I could be wrong, very possible, but I don't see many people going for that, and I don't think the slight buff to Draven is going to make people suddenly go, oh, Draven's the clear carry in the mech build. Kai'Sa's attack speed is being slowed just a smidge, especially at the 2-star level. If you get up to 3-star, it's a little bit more significant, but if you build mana items onto her, it's still going to get her attacking very quickly, and since they stack on each other, it should still work out pretty well. Vayne is also being increased. He's being buffed, so while there's a Kai'Sa nerf, there is a Vayne buff. I don't think the Kai'Sa nerf is significant enough to overcome what ultimately is the Vayne buff, so recons overall might see a lot more play going forward. I already use them in a couple of builds, Brawler recons, and then another one that someone had requested, video coming out from the old patch in a few days, but it really shows what they could do at the old level, and now with the AI improvements and Vayne damage improvements, it could become a really good build to look for. Vel'Koz mana and damage is being slightly nerfed. You think maybe, well, threats are off the table. They are not, and we will explain why in a moment. So let's move on to tier 4 and what I think is really the story in these patch notes. So Bel'Veth. There was a bug that was in Bel'Veth that really no one knew about until they announced it, where she was only getting a 5% scaling from AD items when she was supposed to be getting 50% scaling. That is a huge bug that no one knew existed, and lots of her used her as a secondary carry in a threats team and were winning with it. So they fixed that bug, so Bel'Veth got a heck of a lot stronger. In order to counteract but fixing the bug did, which they said is a massive buff, they made some slight adjustments. They reduced her base damage from 85 down to 80, her attack speed per cast from 30 down to 25, and the endless banquet damage 25, 40, 160 to 20, 30, 150. I don't think these nerfs are going to come close to the giant buff from 5% to 50% that we saw. I think Bel'Veth is going to be ridiculously strong for a while, and I know I'm going to be trying to go for threats a lot more often than I was before. Now, I had mentioned Animaniacs had basically gotten a lot of little stealth buffs. Here's another one. Misfortune now casts towards the largest clump of enemies. If you remember before, she would just kind of cast at whatever enemy she was aiming at, and if that happened to die, she would then slowly move across the board to try to get to others. Well, now she's going to turn faster when there are no more enemies in the cone. To make up for that, they have reduced the first bullet damage by a smidge. 50, 70 to 50, 45, 65 to 10. I do not see, I very rarely got a 3-star Misfortune. Actually, change that. I never got a 3-star Misfortune. Never quite made it. Got one Misfortune away once. But 50 to 70 down to 45, 65, when you take into account that she's now going to go after the largest clump of enemies, and she's also going to be moving faster, this to me is an overall buff, and that is now the third buff in the Animaniacs build that was already getting me a pretty easy climb all the way through the ladder. Back over to threats, Zack is getting a fairly major buff. Health damage ratio 18 to 25%, and the split missing health percent heal 20 to 30%. Further, his blobs are going to spawn 100% faster. So I often built with planning for 8 threats, but would use Sejuani instead of Zack until I got Zack up to 2 stars, and then just wanted to see the 8 threats. I actually have a video coming out in a few days sort of about that, where I go through that exact debate. This may take that away, so threats with the buff to Bel'Veth and then also to Zack, yeah, I feel like that's going to be a lot more dominant than it already was. Zed is getting a buff in that they are flattening out his kill mode duration to 7 seconds across the board, so you're not going to have a big spike at 3, but it'll be better because at 1 and 2 it will work. But at the third attack, bonus damage is going to increase from 30, 45, 200 to 40, 60, 300. Along with the laser buffs, this may matter because Zed will be doing more damage and this is a laser duelist, so he will have more ability to get in faster and do more damage, especially with the lasers as well. We'll have to see how it plays out, if lasers actually works, or if it only is really going to matter when you go for the reach of 9 lasers, which, like I said, requires 2 emblems or a heart and an emblem, but some combination that gets you to 9, which is not that easy to hit. Let's look at the 5-cost units. Aphelios is getting a buff. The 3-star Aphelios, yeah, that's just going to get ridiculous if someone can hit a 3-star Aphelios. But in all honesty, in Hyperroll, I don't even think about the 3-star 5-cost. There at the purple, it's a slight nerf. At blue and red, that is a slight buff. 200, 200 to 225, 270, 270 to 300, 300. It'd be nice to hit a 3-star, but again, I don't even think about that in Hyperroll. That's something really only in ranked, and only if you just decide to go for it for a YouTube video. Fiddlesticks is getting an overall buff. Although he starts with 90 mana, it's being reduced to 66 so that he will likely be able to cast a second time before he goes down, since he doesn't trigger that first attack until reaching a lower health percentage. He's also gaining a little bit more armor and magic resist, and increasing his damage across the board, 100, 150, 900 to 111, 166, 1000. Further, they're increasing the max health threshold up to 70%. So I already found Fiddlesticks to be a really effective threat unit, especially in that comp, because he would just slow everything down. I would also use him in Animaniacs as a final thing to just kind of slow the rest of the team down while Misfortune just threw waves of death over the team. The fact that he is getting buffed, it works into my 2 favorite comps that I play the most. Syndra mana buff. I think this is significant for people who use Syndra. Just remember, please keep people on your bench if you're doing it. There's a good chance in a Star Guardian build that with this buff, she will cast twice, so she's going to throw 2 people off your bench, so have some 5 costs sitting on the bench waiting to go. And for our final threat change, Urgot's getting some adjustments. The Undertow passive auto's attack ratio is going from 30 to 40%, so a little buff there. The attack speed ratio, 10 to 20%, a little buff there. The stun duration is getting nerfed a teeny bit, 1.25, 1.5 down to 1 and 1.5. We don't have to talk about the 3-star level, do we? The Undertow treasure chest chance is getting increased a little bit, 12% to 15%, 15% to 25%, 100% at the 3-star level, and we all know how often you get a 3-star Urgot, and the chance for an item component is being decreased a little bit. So you're more likely to get a chest, but it's more likely to just contain gold. And another stab at the heart of the cat, they are making changes to Giant Slayer and Blue Buff. Blue Buff ability power is getting reduced from 15 to 10, so you're not getting as much of a boost off the top. The Dragon's Claw is going to be giving you an additional magic resist bonus, bringing you up to a total of 70 MR from it. The Giant Slayer is being reduced. That was one of the popular Yuumi items, so from 30% down to 25% total damage amplification. The Hextech Gunblade is going up in Omnivamp from 20 to 25%. Infinity Edge is being increased from 15 to 20%, giving you a 30% total damage bonus. We're going to chug along into hero augments. The Leaf Flurry is being completely taken out and changed to Cleansing Safeguard. Cleansing Safeguard, you'll gain a Lee Sin. Ability costs 30 mana less to cast, and when he casts, sheds all negative effects and heals 18% of his missing health. That should be fairly good. The only problem is, other than possibly in a Heart build, I'm not sure where he's going to fit. Supers is getting nerfed. Brawlers is getting nerfed. So it's going to be interesting to see where he's going to fit in these comps. Again, possibly a Heart build. I haven't seen anything aimed at the Soraka Heart comp, which is really strong, as I showed in the Broken video. And I don't want to go through all the hero augment changes. There's a lot of them because, as I said, they were make and break, and there were some that were really bad and some that were really good. So they've tried to even it out a little bit. Overall, what I find the most interesting, some of the ones I used in my build, such as the Silas, where I would build around that for Animaniacs, that got buffed. The Yuumi Predatory Precision got completely shredded from 30 ability power down to 5. Someone hates cats, man. I mean, wow, they just went after Yuumi with a vengeance. The Zoomies is still there, so you can still have that super fast Nunu running around, but Yuumi will not be hurting people anymore. She has been declawed, and that is illegal in most states, and I don't know if someone's going to do something about that, but this poor cat just suffered. But as you can see, there are a lot of changes in here in terms of the specific hero augments. Again, I don't want to go through all of them. We'll see them as we play games. In overall augments, we kind of went through these. They took Blue Battery out. Build Different has come out at different levels. They've reduced Double Trouble a little bit. This one I kind of found funny. The High Roller Gold, they called it a nerf. Yes, instead of getting 6 gold, and this is in ranked, you get more in Hyper Roll, but instead of getting 6 gold, they reduced it to 3. That wasn't the power of High Roller. The power for me in High Roller was that you got the 3 loaded die, which, by the way, if you were doing a threat build, that meant you were going to get a really strong threat team. So this is what it is. That 3 gold ain't making a difference. The Jeweled Lotus bonus crit chance is going from 25 down to 20. The real key in this is not the specific chance that you're getting, it's the fact that it automatically allows all of your abilities to crit, so you don't need a Jeweled Gauntlet. I would still often get one just to increase the crit chance, but you don't need it. So that was really the key there. If you were running Jeweled Lotus with 3 recons, they were then critting on every single ability. The Luden's damage decrease again felt like another side back into the Spellslingers, which they already nerfed in different ways. Now we'll head into the small changes, and oh look, here's Anima Squad getting a slight buff at 7. Just a slight buff, but it's still a buff. And again, Animaniac's one of my favorite, although I don't often take it to 7. I usually stop at 5, so it doesn't really impact that. Ox-Force max attack speed is being increased just a little bit until you get up to the highest level, then it's a fairly more significant buff, but 70 to 80 and 140 to 150 is not terrible for a skill that a lot of people considered pretty strong. The bonus damage on Renegade is getting a little bit of a nerf, 40 to 80 down 40 to 70. So these two kind of went together, and I think that will balance them out pretty much to where they are now. Then we have some small changes to various units, and really nothing here that jumped out at me as significant. You know, at 3-star Rammus is being reduced from 225 to 205. Didn't really count on hitting a 3-star Rammus all the time. Usually stopped at 2. If I got it, great. Kind of same concept with Cho'Gath. 1-star 150. Loses a little bit of his magic resist ratio at 190 from 200, but that's not going to change whether I'm going to go into threats. That was more of a Bel'Veth decision. Aurelian Soul's Meteor Shower damage being decreased just a smidge at the highest level only. How often did you hit a 3-star Aurelian Soul? I know, not often for me. Samira's attack ratio being increased again at the 3-star ratio. How often did I hit a 3-star Samira? Haven't done it yet, so not exactly. Soraka's Star Call, again, only at the 3-star level. The difference here is that the max health heal is from 10% down to 8%. That isn't a major nerf, but at least it does something to the Heart Soraka build, but it's really her power that matters, and they didn't do anything about that. Viego is getting a little bit of a buff, a little bit more health, and then a little bit more damage on his attack, only at the 1 and 2-star levels, but that could possibly make Viego a little more attractive, and we might see more of the Renegade Ox-Force Viego builds going forward. Nunu's damage is also being reduced, 135, 205 to 125, 190. That was kind of necessary because he was getting a little bit ridiculous with how much damage he would do as he rolled over people. But again, with the right augments, it kind of doesn't matter because when he's got zoomies on, he tends to get out of people's range and just come back and hit them again. Now let's look down at the different things they'll be doing in the modes. Again, Fortune's Favor, that is the new one that's coming in, but let's look specifically at Hyper Roll. Samira Hero Augment, bonus attack speed is going to be reduced from 5% down to 4.5. I'd still take it if I get it if I'm running a Samira build. The Gangplank Hero Augment Get Paid chance increases from 33% to 63%. I'm glad to see that because that was nonsensical to only have a 1/3 chance to get gold after taking a Gangplank specific augment. And then we have a couple of bug fixes. Trait emblem items will now appear correctly in the late game armories. How nice. Fixed an issue where some armories were only showing 2 or 3 completed item instead of the intended 4. I thought the 2 or 3 was actually intended, so yeah, I didn't know I was missing out. And Siver's delivery tip augment now works properly on Hyperroll. Nice to know. I didn't know it wasn't working properly. And that really brings us to the end of this video, minus some of the other bug fixes, which I'm not going to read through, but you can look it up. Link is in the description. Please let me know if you liked seeing this type of video with patch notes and descriptions and how it impacts Hyperroll. Overall, I think Animaniacs and Threats just got stronger as a result of this, and I'm going to look to play them even more than I did before. Might jump in and try some Renegade Viego because it looks like they buffed him just a little bit. I'm going to avoid mech for now unless I see myself getting a lot of sets. Other than that, things pretty much stayed the same for me because I didn't really play that Supers Yumi build that was just eviscerated. Hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know again if you want me to do more like this. And as always, hope you have an absolutely awesome day.